Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm here with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's up, man?
Not much, brother. Again, like always, and I can't reemphasize this enough, man. I'm excited every time we record an episode. And with that said, brother, let's go ahead and kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, Russ Barnes, to the show. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be on the show. I've had the opportunity to listen to some episodes, and you guys are doing a real great job knocking it out of the park.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And we're excited to have you on the show today. Before we kind of jump into everything, we're going to ask you a few questions and just kind of talk about a few things. But could you just give us a quick overview of who you are and what you're all about?
Russ Barnes, obviously. I grew up in New York, third of 8 kids in my family. A very unique situation because my 2 older brothers were 5 and 6 years older than I am. My next brother was 3 years younger, and then on down from there. So it was almost as though I was part of 2 families, and it created a very unique perspective for me because at a time I was the baby of the family. For a time I was the leader of the family, and then there was that time where I felt like an only child. And so it really determined my path in life and how I kind of navigate things. I ended up going to college on an ROTC scholarship, and that's what got me into the military. I planned to do 4 years and then get out and make some real money. That turned into more than 4 years.
27 or something like that, right?
I served 27 years on active duty as an officer. I was a combat aviator. I flew combat missions during Desert Storm in the B-52 as a radar navigator. I spent 16 years on higher headquarters assignments, which I refer to myself as a staff geek. 9 of those years I was in joint service, so I got to work with officers and enlisted folks from the other services, which was incredible for me because I learned the different cultures. And then I retired in December of 2009, so a little more than 10 years ago, and set out on my entrepreneurial journey because I never wanted to work for anybody ever again.
Come on, Russ. You just said it, brother. Man, what you just said, one, coming from an infantry officer from the Army of 10 years, I want to thank you for your service, one.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
But 2, brother, coming out of that's exactly why I'm an entrepreneur today. I did not, after my 10 years, from and I've said this on the show, from the toxic leadership to the awesome leaders I had, it's not always a pleasant journey during that time. And you spent seemed like forever, right? 27 years. That's a long time, brother. But
I want to jump on something you just said, which is leadership. And leadership is one of the things that kept me on active duty for as long as I stayed.
There you go.
Fascinating. I saw some good leaders. I saw some poor leaders. And I had to create my own leadership style because my personality really didn't fit what I saw. And so I was able to do that. And my last assignment on active duty was a culmination of tremendous things. And I felt that my leadership was right on point by the time I retired.
I love it, man. I love it. So with all that said, through your introduction, and as the founder of Systro, which we kind of talked about offline a little bit, as well as a fellow podcaster with the Purposefully Profitable podcast, as well as the author of Small Business of Service Members, man, how did your entrepreneurial journey start? Because like we said, 27 years in the military, man, and then now, how did that inspiration come about, and what it is about entrepreneurship that you're passionate about, man?
It started with me as a kid, and the seminal story, the origin story for me in terms of entrepreneurial life was when I was in 3rd grade. I was in gym class and I didn't have a pair of sneakers. My sneakers wore out and I didn't have a pair of sneakers, so I had shoes on. And gym teacher told me that if I didn't come with sneakers, that he was going to fail me in the class. And I didn't want to go home and ask my father for a pair of sneakers. He was going to give me the lecture about how I tear everything up. So I didn't.
Right.
My mother, she would intercede on my behalf and ask him. And she said, no, it's your sneakers. You ask him.
Right.
And so I decided at that moment in life that I never wanted to have to ask anybody for anything. And I was going to find a way to get the things that I wanted. And so at that point, I started looking for ways to make money. How can I make money? How can I buy my own things? And I shoveled snow, raked lawns. By the time I was 13, because you had to be 13 to get a blue card, I got my paper out. And I had my paper out, excuse me, pardon me. I had my paper out all the way until I was a sophomore in high school. And I just actually had more than one paper out because I could make more money with more paper, delivering more paper. And that started me out on that entrepreneurial path. And as I went through, though, my dad always emphasized that we go to college. So that was really my focus through high school is, well, how am I going to go to college? I didn't get an athletic scholarship or anything. And I did well on the SAT. So the different services contacted me to apply for the scholarships. And I did win most of them for the different services. And I chose the Air Force because that fit me. It just fit. So, I don't want to walk around with a pack on my back. I don't want to be in the ocean. Can't swim to safety if something happens.
Want to be free and flying.
I like the idea of the Air Force. And I really have pure aspirations to fly. I just like the idea of the Air Force culture. And I actually, initially, when I joined ROTC, I was planning on going into computers. And that was my assignment. But I had some experiences in ROTC that said, if I don't go into the operational career field, they're going to kick me out. An attitude. So I got into the military and having all these experiences, and the experiences really turned out to be entrepreneurial because for me in the Air Force didn't put me into a career path in which I could grow and continue. The Air Force said, oh, we need you here. So I was a bomber guy. My first staff assignment was working fighter programs. So I figured that whole thing out. And I had to join the community of fighter people so that I could figure out how I could help them. And then, I had another assignment where I went to the Pentagon and I'm a political military officer. I had no background in that. I went to European Command as Chief of Intel Plans and Requirements. I come to Central Command as Chief of the Policy Division. All of these things were areas in which I had no training, background, and experience, and they didn't give me any. So I had to figure out how to make all that stuff happen. So by the time I retired, I felt very capable of being an entrepreneur. But then the problem was I didn't know what my value was or how to translate that value into something that would enable me to make a living. And so that was the next part of the journey. And what I ended up doing is when I went through the TAP program, I met this lady who had a company, who was working for a company called the Entrepreneur's Source. And we started talking about this idea of franchise. And that's what got me started on the journey of being a business owner.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so it sounds like in the military, you learned how to adapt and how to, if there was a sink or swim type situation, you were going to swim, like you were going to figure it out no matter what. And I think that's a key part of being an entrepreneur. But like you said, you had to figure out I can do whatever, I can rise to any occasion, but what is the occasion, I guess?
I had an assignment in my last assignment where they sent me to Saudi Arabia to help the Ministry of Interior set up a facility security force, a security assistance operation. I knew absolutely nothing about any of that because that's an Army thing, operate. That's an Army thing. But they said, I was in 06, and they said, we're going to send you out there. You're going to be out there until we find a general officer to replace you. And I couldn't figure out if it was just, I couldn't figure out why they were sending me to do this. Am I just a placeholder? Am I just supposed to sit in the chair all day until they find a general officer? I didn't take that attitude. I said, if you're sending me to do this job, then I'm assuming you want me to do the job.
Right.
So I got out there and I got a book. I actually have it right up there. the management, what is it? The Management of Security Assistance. So I got the book. It's a big, green, thick book.
I read see it up there.
I read the book, and it showed me what to do. And from that point on, I just walked down the path and figured things out. And I wanted to tell that story because there was a guy who was in Saudi when I arrived, and he was a major. And I was asking him, how does this work? What's happened to this point? And what needs to be done? And so he started giving me a story about how it wouldn't work and this thing and this and how messed up everything was. And I said, well, okay, I get that, but what is it that we're supposed to be doing? What's the next step that has to happen? And he just really couldn't tell me. And so we got into a personal conversation about his career. And during his career, he started talking about being set up to fail. And man, I said, you can't be set up to fail. You can be given an opportunity or a challenge that you are not prepared for. You need to rise to that challenge. And if you rise to that challenge and you get it done, then you move up to the next level of responsibility. And so that's been my perspective on life as well. And I carry that into my entrepreneurial life.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, you ended up founding this company, Systro Business Strategy. Mm-hmm. And with that, you help small businesses create more efficient organizational systems. What was your inspiration for starting that business?
Because when I retired, and as I was retiring, I looked at various options. I'd been working in the government for a long time, so I thought my best avenue forward would be to go and work as a government contractor, And so I spent a few $1,000s doing my due diligence and taking courses to prepare myself for that. And what I found out was that was a dangerous area to go into when you don't have enough experience and skill to navigate those waters. I just said, man, those are shark-infested waters. Lose my shirt really quickly. And I talked to a lot of people. I went to conferences and I did my due diligence. And so when the opportunity to go into the franchise came available, I said, okay, this is my master's degree. I'm going to get in here and I'm going to figure out how I, with my personality, can become a successful business owner. And it was even to the point where I said, I need to know even if I can do this. I didn't know if I could even be a business owner at that point. I just knew it was something that I had to do for my life. And as I did that due diligence and I started to walk down that path, I found out that there was no structure, no framework, nothing, no organization for what it took to be a successful business owner. And so I built that franchise for 3 years. It was a 5-year contract. That's another whole long story. But I built that for 3 years, and I wanted to be in the community of business owners so I could see what they were doing. And at the end of that period of time, I found out that there's a point which I now refer to as the preprofitability stage, where a business owner is struggling to understand what to do and how to do it. There's no help. The small administration, while they provide great services and great training, can only help you if you are at a certain point in your business where you have revenue and where you might have employees or at least people helping you. It's the same thing with the Business Development Center. And SCORE counselors are really focused functionally, so they can help you as a business owner holistically. And these are all great organizations. So if you are out there, definitely contact them and definitely use their resources. But there's a point before they can be good. And that is where I started to see challenges that I might be able to address based upon my skill set as a person who thinks strategically and functions from an organizational perspective. So my goal with Systro, which is Systems for Strategy and Organization, it's a made up word that I've registered as a trademark, was to bring the ability of strategy and organization to people who did not want to be or were not capable of being strategists, and to spend that time crafting and constructing organizational frameworks. So that's what I do. I have several models that I've created, and the idea is what I call structure without restriction. Because as a business owner, you don't want to be told what to do, but you know you need guidance. So I can come in as a strategist with the frameworks and help you understand where the boundaries are. And you come in with your passion, with your experience, with your expertise, with your knowledge, with your skill, and we co-create this path, then it's a win-win for both of us. And the people I work with, it's wonderful. It's you get to this point where you're just feeding back and forth, with each other, and I just love what I do.
Yeah, and I remember. So when I just graduated college, I had a business idea. It was a product. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I was like, I have to develop a product. I have to sell it, not realizing how difficult that actually is, but also very possible if you do it, if you follow certain steps. But I knew that I had a lot of work to do. I knew that I needed to be busy. I didn't know what to be busy with.
Exactly.
I had no idea. And that really, I can really relate to that what did you call it? The
pre-profitability.
Pre-profitability. Yeah. It was like before I even had anything to sell, I just needed to figure out, not just that, because I knew how to design a product, but I didn't know how to put all the other pieces together. I didn't know how to, figure out the logistics of it. And so I was just kind of like stabbing in the dark until, I finally had a product manufactured, had a warehouse to ship it out of, and then it was like, cool, how do I get customers? And then that's a whole nother, a whole nother thing. So, and actually I realized how important that is, but yeah, I can definitely relate to that pre-profitability stage when you don't know what to do.
Yeah. And it's a matter of focus. So when you are not focused on those specific things that are moving you forward in a progressive way, then that's when the overwhelm hits you. And
exactly.
The anxiety hits you and the uncertainty hits you. And you are at times wasting resources, and you're wasting resources, but you don't know
what else to do
or how, and you just have to power your way through it. And that's what I've been attacking for the past 7 years, is how do I get a business owner to be more purposeful and intentional in their approach. And you can't just tell them to do that. You have to show them.
Right.
Stay and guide them. So as a strategist, I don't call myself a coach or a consultant. I refer to myself as a strategist. So as a strategist, we map that out.
Yeah.
And the two programs I have, and it is a tongue twister, and I heard you kind of struggling with that tongue twister a little bit, Purposefully Profitable Program.
Yeah. Say that 5 times real fast.
Yeah, exactly. I can do that.
I know you can, but me, I'm going to trip all over myself.
And the key is just say it slow. Purposefully Profitable Program.
There you go.
So that's where I work business to consumer, one-to-one strategy work. And then I have a mission mapping program that I use when I work business to business. And it's very methodical progression through a path that helps you create your own personal path to prosperity, is what I call it.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned it as a framework. I think, and we talked about this offline too. And I think that's why when I was in the military, I loved it just for the simple fact that there was an operations order. There was a framework that's been in existence for a couple hundred years, and has been a proven a methodology that's in place in the military for us to be successful, and win wars or whatever you want to call it. But it's just, man, when you lay a framework out for a business owner, a small business owner, because I'm in the digital marketing space. So I've seen a lot of small business owners reach out for help, but they're past the point of help because they've spent so much money in areas that it was like, they didn't know what they were doing, and they were just spending money to try to make money. But they had no framework laid out. They were trying to get to step Z before they even did A, B, and C. And it's like, man, and next thing you know, they call me as a marketer to help them figure it out. And by that point, I'm like, this is what we actually need to do. But they're like, man, I wish I would have talked to you sooner, because now, like, I have to close my doors because I have no more money. And it's discouraging, because I'm like, man, like if you can't fault small business owners either, because again, they get this idea and they want to run with it, right? They're so passionate about something, but again, they don't know what they don't know. And I always make sure and I think it's a duty of mine as a digital marketer to educate clients, because again, they'll ask for a service and I'm like, do you really need this? Let's actually, go and dig a little deeper. And let me ask you some other questions, because I'm not trying to sell you on something you don't need. So if you don't need what you're asking for, I'm not going to try to sell you on that, right? I'm going to actually try to sell you on something you need, and actually, recommend it, and put the ball in their court and let them make that decision. So, man, I love the fundamentals and the framework that you mentioned.
Yeah. So when we put together a milestone map, which is actually the end of a 4-strategy session process, when we put together the milestone map, then they can see in a visual way, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and then how do we get from where I am to where I want to be. And that is actually the definition of strategy that I use through my company. Strategy is simply, how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? So the first thing you need to figure out is, well, where do I want to be? And you need to figure that out both in terms of money and meaningfulness. Because if you figure out just in terms of money, then after a while, it's going to become unfulfilling for you. And if you figure it out just in terms of meaningfulness, it's going to become unsustainable. Not going to be charging for what your value is worth. So we figure that where you want to be, we figure it out in terms of meaningfulness and money. And in the beginning, it can be an artificial construct. For me, it started with just knowing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And it started with me knowing I needed to replace $40,000 in income that I was losing as a result of my retirement. If I wanted to maintain my same level of lifestyle, I needed to replace $40,000 in annual income. So that was enough. It doesn't have to be specific. It just has to be enough. Because then, as I said, okay, if I want to be an entrepreneur and I need to make this amount of money, how much money do I have now? How much money am I making? What do I know? And so that helped me to say, when that franchise opportunity came along, I could say, okay, this is going to give me an opportunity to figure out what an entrepreneur does and how they do it. And it also gives me opportunity to generate $40,000 in income that I need to replace. And so now I could just walk down that path. And so if I want to be an entrepreneur, what do I need to know? I need to know what entrepreneurs do, how do they function. So I start studying entrepreneurs. So you can see how I'm being purposeful and intentional, moving along my path and using my resources effectively, because I know what I need as my desired outcome. So that's how it works in execution. And it actually does work very well. And so now if somebody is saying, somebody will say, a business owner will say, I need to do my website, or I need to do social media, or, whatever it may be. When they look at this milestone map, they can say, well, I'm not ready for social media because I haven't really identified what I'm selling, who I'm selling it to, and what problem I'm solving, and whether or not it's a problem that people are willing to pay for. So now they realize I need to do all this stuff before I start getting into, building a website.
Sure. I mean, I've run into it all the time, man. So where somebody's like, hey, they reach out to me, whether they watch a YouTube video or whether somebody recommended them to me because I'm handling stuff for their business and social media, and I'm like, hey, go check this guy out. But they don't even have a website yet. They don't even have a Google My Business page. They don't have anything laid out. They haven't even applied for a business license yet, right? And I'm just like, you don't need social media yet. You need to get all that stuff squared away and then come back and talk to me later.
Yeah, and those key critical pieces. So we'll start and we'll focus on the where you want to be. Then we'll step back and say, where are you? And then we just progress right down the line and say, okay, what is your skill? What is your talent? What are you good at? What do you believe you can be best in the world at? Good to Great is a book that I love. E-Myth Revisited is a book that I love. These provide that sort of framework and structure that help you to understand a personal development that needs to happen as you walk down this path. And then you get into what is the problem you're solving? What is the solution? How do you package that? And this is the most challenging problem that I run into with everyone I work with. And it's how do you price it? How do you price it? And once we can work, to the pricing, then you can now get into the selling. And I tell them, if you're not capable or willing to sell your own product or service, you're going to have real problems, because selling gives you more than just money. It gives you communication with your clients who will tell you what they want, who will tell you what they need, who will tell you where their pain is, and then will tell you whether or not your solution is solving their problem. So you have got to have those conversations. And that's what I call selling. Because if you have those conversations effectively, people will purchase from you. They'll go, hey, you understand my problem. You've listened to me. Your solution is suitable. And I think you're going to provide the value I need in order to move forward. You're either going to help me save money or you're going to help me make money. And I think this could be a win-win situation. So philosophically, that's kind of how we progress down that path in a purposeful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, making sure you're not creating a problem that, just creating a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, because that happens all the time.
Yeah, or exists only for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that's why it makes it such an effective working relationship, because the clients are now in control. They're using their own sense of passion about what they believe they can do. But as we're walking down the path, their financial commitment to this path can be kept at a very low level. And I do work. So let me lay this out for you, if you don't mind. There are 4 categories that I call Systro stages that we work through. So the first, Systro stage 1, is pre-revenue and pre-profitable. You don't have much money at all in most cases. And the second stage is revenue, pre-profitable. So we've worked through a revenue strategy, and now you have control over your revenue, at least one revenue stream. Now we go into Systro stage 2, revenue pre-profitable. And then from there, we go into revenue profitable, but not exit ready. So you don't have those systems in place that enable you to have a value for your company beyond you. And the 4th stage, Systro stage 4, is revenue profitable, exit ready. But now it's a matter of timing and when you're going to be ready to retire or to sell your company. And so we focus in on Systro stage 1. That's my passion. That's where I like to work. But the challenge is people can't afford to pay me in that stage. And so I tell them, you have to make money before you can spend money. So we have to concentrate on that business model and make the business model produce before we can go into Systro stage 2.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So I've been working on this for, 7 years. And I really just want to get to the point where I can help. And my goal for my company is to help 600,000 micro business owners become purposefully profitable. That's what I'm striving towards. And so now you can see how my desired outcome has become massive.
Sure.
When you have a massive goal like that, it drives you to find better solutions. I know I cannot reach that goal through simple strategy sessions. I can't reach that goal just by writing books. I can't reach that goal just by putting together a podcast. I can't reach that goal just by doing workshops. I have to find something bigger and better. And that's what gets me up every morning with enthusiasm, motivation.
Yeah, creating your own strategies and organization to make that happen. Because that's a big number. Even just hundreds or thousands, or even 1,000 or more. would be, per year, especially, would be a huge number. But
Yeah.
And especially considering that you're probably working with these companies from day one, when they can't afford to pay you right away, you're sort of investing yourself and your time into them, knowing that, eventually they are going to be able to pay you. You're going to be able to help them get to the next through your 4 phases, and you're going to work with them for a long period of time. So each customer, 600,000 customers times however long, years really, that you're involved with them. I mean, it's a lot of time. So you need a lot of help with that.
Yeah. Well, and so that raises that sense of creativity. So I ask myself the question, is 600,000 a realistic number? So then I go out and I look and say, well, has anybody ever done this before? And I look at, there's a lady named Alexa Von Tobel who created a company called LearnVest, where it was the same concept, but applied to investment, because she saw her parents who didn't have enough money to be able to invest with one of the major investment companies. They want like $500,000 going in, but they wanted to put them somewhere. They didn't have the education or the understanding, so they weren't savvy in terms of investment. So she created this program where a person can come in with a little bit of money, get the education they need, invest the money, grow it, and then eventually get to the point where they would be able to contribute that. So I looked at that, and then looked at who is it? It's a Total Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey with Total Money Makeover. And how many people has he been able to help become financially successful through him? And so I said, this has been done. This is not realistic. I have models that I can follow, and I have things that I can look at. I just have to create it in my own way based upon the community of people that I'm trying to help. And so when you have that desired outcome, you have that goal, you can then begin to look out and say, okay, who has already done this? And you can begin to pull pieces and parts of that and put it together. So again, you're not haphazard. You're not trial and error. You're not trying to figure it out. You can begin to sort of follow their model and then make the adjustments as you find out what the differences are in your community.
Yeah, and you're not recreating the wheel, which is cool.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of us spend a lot of time and waste a lot of time. We're trying to recreate it, trying to make that perfect model. But like you said, man, there's already models out there. There's already people doing it. If you think it hasn't been thought of right now, I mean, it's very, very rare that you find something that hasn't been thought of, maybe not executed on, right? Or maybe not executed properly. But there are models out there, people moving forward with things, and it's just you putting your own spin on it, and making sure like the gaps or the holes that you see in somebody else's plan, you're buttoning that up, man, and making it, bulletproof to where it's like, hey, this is going to work. Yeah. And one, it also gives you the inspiration to keep moving forward, right? And also notice that you sent in when you marked on our calendar to record our show after I asked you, and I really appreciate this because, man, you're dropping a lot of knowledge bombs, and I love every minute of this. I noticed that you wrote a dissertation, right, about organizational design for small business.
Yep.
And a discovery of business fundamentals for executing a purposeful path to profitability. And I know we're hitting all on this, but I wanted to ask this question. I mean, from your experience, where does the organization of small businesses tend to fall apart from what you've seen? And how much better can better organization overall add to a company's bottom line?
It falls apart right at the very beginning because of the mindset. And the mindset of an entrepreneur is, I have to be prepared to pivot. I have to be adaptable. I have to adjust the environment. I have to, figure out how all this stuff works. And if I start thinking about organization, then I'm putting myself in a box, and I'm starting to create a structure. And once I do that, then I'm limiting my ability to be flexible. And so from the very beginning, that mindset is, organization is something that's going to come down the line. Right now, I just need to be creative. And I need to fit fast, and I need to throw stuff against the wall, and I need to trial and error this thing until I can get some traction. Once I get some traction, I get some money, then I can figure this thing out. So it falls apart right from the very beginning, right from the outset. And so that's why when we sit down and I begin to bring organization in, I don't talk to them about organization. I don't talk to them about the models. I don't talk to them about anything. I just work in an organized way, and they get the benefit of seeing how that organization approach works. And they still feel like they're not restricted. And so that's where acceleration. So I talk first about traction, and then I talk about acceleration. And you're taking limited resources, maximizing them because you're using them as effectively as you can. You're going to lose some money. Nothing's perfect. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to go through everything that every entrepreneur goes through. But the idea is that you make less of them. And you've heard of the 20 questions, the game 20 questions. You get to ask 20 questions to figure out what the person had in their mind. And when your 20 questions are done, if you haven't figured out what they had in their mind, then the game is over. And it's a similar way in business. Your resources are your 20 questions. And when you've asked your 20 questions, if you haven't figured it out by that point, then you're done. You're out of the game. And so what I try to help them do with strategy is to make the best use of those 20 questions so that then they get the traction, and then they can accelerate, and then they can move forward. And so that's the idea behind the organization. And it's design. And so there are these three analogies that I use for business because I haven't really quite figured this out yet. The analogy of running a marathon, you have to take every step along the way. But when you run a marathon, the course is marked and you know where the finish line is. And there are people along the line cheering you on, and you get a medal when you're done. Whereas if you just stepped out of your house and you ran 26.2 miles with no direction and no Garmin and no sense of how far you've gone, you might think you've gone 10 miles and you've only gone 1. If you're that's the way it feels. So that's one analogy. The other analogy is of building a house. When you build a house, you architect the thing. You put together a plan. Where are the rooms going to be? You don't just start going to buy furniture and then figure out how am I going to build this house around the furniture. You don't put the roof, or put the walls up before you put the foundation in. And so there's a very purposeful way you go about building a house. And then the third analogy is raising a child. I initially thought it's growth. It's the idea of growing a business. And you can grow a business like as if it were a plant, where you plant a seed, you water it, you put some fertilizer on it, and you wait for it to grow. But businesses don't grow that way. They more like children, where it's a thinking entity. Your business is almost a thinking entity because as it goes stages, you're going to have to do different things in order to keep it moving along. What got you to 1 million won't get you to 10 million. What got you won't get you to 100 million. You have to nurture it in a more engaging way. So those kind of three approaches mentally towards how you approach this, but they're all organizational frameworks. And when you understand them as organizational frameworks, it's a lot easier to apply. And so that's kind of what I was getting at in terms of I haven't really, is one of those the right one? Do you have to consider all three at the same time? How does it? But I'm a learner. I love to learn. I love to learn. You see all these books. I love to learn. And this is fascinating for me because it's a part of the learning process that once I figure it out, I can share it more effectively with people and say, you know what, you're actually in the house building stage. You're actually in the nurturing stage. You're actually in the marathon stage. And if I can maybe validate that as a progression, I can help it make more sense to more people. And my skill set really also is taking complexity and simplifying it so that it is actionable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the marathon analogy because I think that makes a lot of sense. But with entrepreneurship, it's kind of like you can be, running around aimlessly, but if you do have some systems in place, you're at least going on a set path. but like there's no finish really. You just keep going, but you could have milestones along the way. Like, okay, I want to hit this milestone, that I want to get to 100,000 in revenue. I want to get to 1 million or whatever it is. And you just keep going. Or,
Exactly.
it could also be, besides money, it really can also be purpose or how you run the business. Cause it's not just about making money and hitting those revenue mile streams, but it's also about how you make that money. I think that's so important because you can make $1 million and be working 24 hours a day, practically trying to scratch and claw your way to all that revenue, instead of setting up these systems and leveraging other people's time, giving them opportunity too, by the way. Like if you're doing less work yourself, you're giving other people an opportunity to earn a living, which is awesome. That's a great purpose, I think. And
it is.
Yeah. And then you start to be able to really grow and really, so having that framework is so important.
Yeah. So everybody is on their own individual and very unique journey. And, I started out saying that my initial desired outcome was to be an entrepreneur. Now my desired outcome is to help 600,000 micro business owners, and there's a money associated with that as well. So you do have to have both the money and the meaningfulness. But your desired outcome might be, I want to build this company and make this money so I can feed this nonprofit. And, you can come up with any number of things that make you motivated to get up in the morning and do that thing that you do, but it's all unique and it's all individual. But you gave me a thought, Andrew, when you just said about the marathon. So the thought that occurred to me was maybe those analogies work for different people with different products. So your mindset be, okay, I understand the marathon analogy and I can apply that. Or somebody else will say, well, I understand the house building analogy and I can apply that. And based on the product or service that I deliver, that makes sense for me. So that's something for me to consider is, maybe testing the analogy with the individual and the type of business. I might find out that people in service businesses resonate with the marathon analogy or the growth analogy. So that's a good thought.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be applied a couple of different ways, and people will, I think people it'll resonate. They'll connect with certain things a little bit more. Or maybe they'll hear what you're saying with one of those analogies and they'll come up with their own.
Exactly.
They'll have, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's kind of like this other thing that, that I have in my life that's very similar. So, so we talked about it a little bit, but with the, we as entrepreneurs, we all have this, we want to get to this certain level, with our businesses. So we talked about setting those milestones, and we tend to get impatient, with getting to those particular levels. How do we get past that? Are we there yet mentality in order to focus on what we need to do on a daily basis and, for long-term success for our business?
Yeah, that's where the milestone map comes into play. And I tell them all the time, strategy gives you patience, because when you can see on a visual outlay what the components are to get from where you are to where you want to be, then instead of trying to get from A to Z, you realize that all I have to do is get from A to B. And then when I get from A to B, then I can go from B to C, and I go from C to D. And the beauty of mapping this out in a visual way, and I am so adamant about writing things down and put it on a piece of paper. We talk about early in the process, we talk about sales process. In order to graduate from Systro stage 1, you have to have a written sales process that you've replicated to prove that you can acquire customers using that sales process. And if you cannot acquire customers using that sales process, then we're going to work on it until you can, or we figure out that whatever it is that you're doing isn't ever going to work. And in which case, then you need to find something new to do, because that is a non-starter. So as you are mapping these things out and you're putting these components in place, you can you can begin to see, okay, I can't get to that point until I do this. So let me just focus. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to get this piece done. I'm going to get this piece in place. And you've both been in business long enough to have a sense of what types of things have to happen in a certain sequence. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your time. And so that's where it comes in when you map out, even if it's an artificial construct, when you map it out and you can see it before you visually, then you can step back and you can take a breath. And once we get through the milestone map part, what I hear from my clients is, number one, man, I feel so much lighter carrying that whole heavy load of the whole project. The second thing they'll say is, this is doable. This is doable. I can see how I can go down this path. And then, so I would actually throw a third analogy in there, and the fourth analogy is that of taking a trip. You know, when we go on vacation and we say we want to go to a certain destination, we first choose that destination. And then once we've chosen that destination, then we can begin to ask the right questions, like, how much is it going to cost us to go there? Where are we going to stay when we get there? Are we going to fly? Are we going to drive? How long are we going to stay? And then you start mapping out from where you are with a desire to go on a vacation and have a great time to where you want to be. And if you find out that you don't know enough to make the trip on your own, you can call a travel agency and say, hey, I need some help planning this trip. And now you have somebody with expertise who can help you. And it's the same thing in business, where you would call a coach, or you would call a consultant, or you would talk to a digital marketer, or you would then know what types of expertise you need to help you along that path. But first, you have to be able to see the path. And so strategy gives you patience. Knowing how to get from where you are to where you want to be gives you that path. And the problem is, most people can't do that on their own. They can't put that together on their own. So that's where they need help.
I think sitting back and just enjoying the journey through the whole process is where, as an entrepreneur, you want to be, right? You don't want to be impatient. Mm-hmm. You don't want to sit there and practice impatience. You always want to have that success right off the bat. Yeah. But and with that said, Russ, through your entrepreneurial journey to date, man, from the highs and lows, because like we've mentioned, entrepreneurs, we go through highs and lows, ups and downs. It's not always an easy process, and you got to be ready to fight, right? You got to be able to fight for survival sometimes. Yeah. What has been the most difficult thing for you about that journey?
You hit the nail on the head when you just opened it up, because it's the emotional roller coaster. It's the ups and downs. It's the, even as strategic and as organized as I approach my business and building my business, those day-to-day things that impact every entrepreneur impact you, because the driver is money. And if you're not generating the revenue you need in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish, that creates a high level of anxiety. And those emotional ups and downs, man, that is the biggest challenge. So what I do to eliminate the roller coaster is I keep my overhead low, and I make sure that I don't extend myself out financially, so that if something catastrophic happened, like COVID, that I would then be trying to figure out, how do I make enough money to keep my doors open? How do I make enough money to put food on my table? How do I make enough money? And now the stress is through the roof, and your creativity actually gets crushed because you're so locked in on, how do I make more money? Biggest challenge in the world is, in my opinion, for an entrepreneur, is that. And so I struggled through that. I really, really struggled through that. But now I've managed to get in a position where I kind of have that space. I have enough money in my account so that if anything bad, I have runway, that financial, I have that runway that I can have some time figure it out before I have to close the doors. And you just have to build that in. You have to build that piece in. Is how do I create a financial bubble so that I continue to be creative even in the midst of chaos and crisis? But it's not going to go away. Your impatience is not going to go away. None of those things that make you an entrepreneur from an emotional perspective are ever going to go away. But you just have to figure out how to manage it. And my right now is through strategy and organization.
And how to be okay with it. Yeah, because when you can see, another thing that really helps besides that strategy, I think, is also once you see a little bit of proof that something's working, then you're like, oh, wow, okay, like cause and effect kind of thing. You did something and you got a result. And then it's like, oh, okay, if I just keep doing that thing, because until you actually get a result, it is really difficult to know that, okay, what I'm doing now is going to get some kind of result. And that's why it does help to have somebody like yourself who's been there, done that, who can say, trust me, if you do this, you will get a result, or at least it's likely that you'll get a result. Or if you don't get a result, then at least we know that we need to just adjust and it'll happen,
And that's where documentation and tracking come in. And Clint, I'm sure you see this from the digital marketing perspective all the time, A/B testing. And you write this thing down, you track how things are progressing, and then that's how you can make sure that you are making the decisions that are leading you to the outcomes.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, Russ, as we wrap up this episode, we could feel like we could talk with you for hours here. This has been awesome. But yeah, as we wrap up this episode, what is one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners that might help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
Function from your perspective, from your position of strength. People overlook their talent too frequently because they think, oh, that's so easy. Anybody can do that. And when in reality, whatever you have as your strength and your talent is something that other people may not want to do, and they may hate it. When I realized that small business owners were not excited or interested in organization or strategy, and I realized how much I loved doing it and how I'd been doing it since I was a kid, that's when I realized I had a marketable skill and talent. And then I just had to figure out, how do I apply it to solve problems in a way that people would be willing to pay me? And that was a journey, but it's a wonderful journey because I'm doing what I love to do every day. I'm doing strategy, I'm doing organization. And I can't believe we just talked about this for an hour. It feels like 10 minutes because you guys have enabled me to be able to just express some things that I love to do. So find your talent, and whether it's self-assessments, Myers-Briggs, Core Map, Herman Brain, whatever. Strength Finders is one of my favorite assessments to do. And when you take those assessments, look at them for the language, not for anything else, but because the language helps you articulate what your strengths are, and you can throw stuff out. So I'll say, okay, yeah, that matches me. When I take an assessment, yeah, that matches me. That makes sense to me. This other stuff, that doesn't quite match me. So I just throw it away. So operate from your strengths and find other people who can help you in those areas in which you're weak, because if they're as strong in those areas in which you are weak, you can make an amazing team. And until you build a team, you're going to have incredible problem scaling. So my piece of advice, find your strength, find your talent, embrace it, love it, and use that to power your journey.
That's awesome, man. Russ, I know you have a 12 hit time, brother. So from the both of us, though, that's a wrap for this episode. But really, man, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for responding the way you did. It was a pleasure meeting you at PodFest 2020. But really, man, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value on what we're doing on our podcast.
Hey, I wish all the best of luck. Not luck. Purposeful and intentional progress.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
Entrepreneurial life, because you guys are bringing a really great service to the community. And I will certainly promote and to tell people to listen to your show.
Appreciate you, brother.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Russ. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Russ is working on, check out systro.org. That's systro.org. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, guys, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends to include all of our followers, our listeners, and subscribers, guys. If you find value in our show, please consider making a small donation. Just even a few dollars helps us keep things moving along to bring value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.